Mark Harrison, are you there?
Yeah, I am, Crispin.
Mark, I don't understand this green paper that the government's put forward. Can you tell us what it's about and why they're doing this?
It's part of an ongoing 10-year, 11-year now concerted attack on the rights of disabled people. And it's called Shaping Future Support, Health and Disability. And what it should be renamed is, cutting disabled people's benefits again. And it's a thinly veiled attempt to destroy personal independence payments by merging them with ESA and universal credit. And the significant thing about that is that personal independence payment, HIP, is an extra cost of disability benefit. It's not means tested. And it was formerly known as Disability Living Allowance, DLA. And right at the beginning of the coalition government, Maria Miller, the Minister Against Disabled People then, announced that she was closing DLA and replacing it with PIP, with the idea of cutting 20% out of the budget. They failed to do this because more and more people are becoming disabled through their life course. But out of that, hundreds of thousands of people lost their access to society. They lost their mobility cars. And that was a real, and PIP has been a disaster. But what they want to do is merge the assessment processes and merge the benefits. And I think the agenda is making PIP means tested and raising the bar yet again, so less and less people can claim it.
Right, and well, it's sort of like they just changed the rules around to make it. They kind of make this confusing, don't they? The whole way they do this, as we discovered on an earlier show about social care.
They're completely duplicitous. And Tomlinson, the Minister Against Disabled People currently, he's what people don't realise, I think, is that the Minister for Disabled People is a DWP minister. He's located in the DWP. So they immediately equate disabled people as benefit scroungers. So we've gone, from disabled people being patronised and, worthy recipients of charity to, like the miners, we're now the enemy within, and we're a drain on society. We cost too much. So the cynical and headlines that you've just been through in the Sunday press, disabled people since 2010 have been the victims of that, that discourse where we're seen as the biggest problem in society. And that's been used as a justification for reducing our living standards and our benefits, and it's a multi-pronged attack. And the largest part of it is through local authorities and the cuts to local authorities. And every local authority in the country at the moment is cutting millions of pounds out of its budgets because austerity is here to stay. And yet Labour is silent on it because, Labour councils up and down the country are cutting millions of pounds out of their budget for children's services and adult social care. And
I'll just aware of the time. Thank you, Mark. That was a really great intro to it because you've made it very clear. Paula, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning, Crispin.
Good morning. Mark was just talking about what this green paper is about, making it more cuts and bringing the benefits all together into one. What's the reaction? What's your reaction to it?
Well, the paper is an absolutely horrendous piece of legislation that they're putting forward. Basically, they're looking at models from Switzerland, which is called the helpless allowance over there, which disabled people in Switzerland only get support in exceptional circumstances. and they're looking at the model in New Zealand where benefits there are means tested and I think are at £34 a week. Well, I'm going to use an example for means testing. If you've got a partner and they've got an income and say a disabled person's working but they claim PIP because of extra support with extra cost for the disability, that disabled person who's working who claims PIP would not qualify if they means test benefits. So there's going to be, you know, millions of disabled people are working who you know, claim PIP for extra cost for the disability who won't qualify for support if they look at that model going forwards. And I think we need to make it really clear here today that a consultation with the government really doesn't mean anything, because what, you know, they're making their minds up, you know, when they talked about a white paper going forwards, and it needs to be stressed, they've got an 80-seat majority. What we've got to do is collectively, we've got to organise around this and push the government back. And I can't stress enough to people today the importance of campaigning, coming together and sharing stories. But we've got to literally, we've got to, you know, unify, organise and fight back. And I think I need to raise here, because we've done a lot of work around this over several years, the co-productive working of the NHS and the DWP. We're seeing the buzzwords in the NHS, you know, work is a health outcome. That's very much part of the DWP strategy going forwards. We're seeing more and more social prescribing in GP surgeries. If you're depressed because you're out of work, the GPs are referring you to the DWP. Work coaches in job centres only have 3 weeks worth of training, by the way, and I think that's really important to stress that. And they're using, if you're depressed, they're using cognitive behavioural therapy, have 6 weeks worth of therapy and you're cured, and you know, you can go back to work. It's not as simple as that. But I think, you know, we really do need, and this is to NHS campaigners, people really do need to join the dots with universal credit and, you know, work is a health outcome and the co-productive working of the DWP NHS. And this is where the data grab is going to come into its fore, because the DWP are going to trawl through disabled people's medical records, which are confidential, and see what the barriers are to you not working. And for people in mental distress, they are top of the DWP's target list to get back to work. And this paper is going to have devastating consequences. What you're going to see is, you know, the rise of poverty, the rise of destitution, obviously people, you know, disabled people not qualifying for support, and you know, causing dreadful distress. And you're going to see the death toll rise even further. And I don't want to say this to scare people, but I'm afraid after 11 years of austerity, when they brought in the welfare reform paper of 2011, that has come to pass. We warned the cuts were going to kill them. We were called scaremongering. Sadly, that happens to be the case. And another model the government are looking at is payment in aids and adaptations rather than financial support. Well, those aids and adaptations should be available on the NHS. And we're seeing more and more disabled people having to fundraise via GoFundMe pages for power wheelchairs and support for long-term therapy, which isn't available in the NHS anymore. Podiatry is not available in the NHS. And sadly, I think, you know, you're seeing, you know, privatisation by stealth with the NHS, where many disabled people and older adults are having to pay for support and care that should be available on the NHS and no longer is. And this is also a huge problem we're seeing now with many NHS staff who are sadly resigning from the NHS, and we're fully behind the 15% increase in pay and fully support the NHS pay campaign. But we are seeing, you know, Capita and Atos luring paramedics and nurses who once worked in the NHS working on disability assessments. And we say to NHS staff, please don't be lured in by blood money from Atos and Capita when it's causing disabled people distress and harm, because, you know, you won't cope with the demands that Atos and Capita put on you, and you'll end up needing support yourself. But this paper is absolutely disastrous, and we need everyone to push back on it and make the government rethink and push back.
Well, thank you for that. Now, I wanted, we haven't got much time because we've got another. We're talking about Latin America, which is a big issue, massive thing. But I wanted to share a clip this week from Angela Rayner and hear what your views are on what she says here.
Unfortunately, I think many people who live with a disability today have seen their standard of living decline under the Conservatives, and this strategy does nothing to address those issues. The announcement today that I've made on flexible working will enable people to be able to work their hours in a way that supports them with their abilities, rather than make them feel that they've got a disability that prevents them from going into the workplace. I've got a disabled son. I want to see him celebrated and his world of work to be transformed, because he's my little miracle, and the fact that he's able to do the things he can do. I don't like to see him as a disabled son. I like to see him as an enabled son to live a fruitful and fantastic life, and I think he can do that. And it's the inflexibility within the system at the moment that reminds him every single day of the things he can't do, rather than supports him in the things he can do. And that's what we should be doing. That's what the government should be doing, is supporting people to live good, healthy, balanced lives.
What did you think about what Angela Rayner said there, Paula? Have you seen that clip?
Yeah, I've just watched through it. Labour need to do more to push the government back on what is happening to disabled people, and their recent comments on, completely reversing on social care should be free at the point of need, because it's a stick from the Tories to beat Labour with. I think it's absolutely appalling for a start. Disabled people need support from, need a national independent living support service. We need the rights to independent living, which is not enshrined in UK law. We need, barriers to transport addressed, because the government are going to be destaffing ticket offices and platforms which impact on disabled people. They're going to be cutting buses and everything, which is going to impact on our ability to travel. Labour need to do more, and I hate the uses of the ableisms that Angela Rayner uses there. And obviously, with the Paralympics due to start, which Atos are sponsoring in Tokyo, we're seeing a branding of the word superhumans and everything. I'd like to see the Paralympians actually protesting against Atos in Tokyo and their appalling involvement in personal independence payments and in the benefit system. We've got more work to do to bring the assessments back in-house and to create a fair and just social security system. So I'm sorry, Angela Rayner, but enough of the ableism, and this is a message to Labour. Why you're not challenging the government on the dreadful impact of the pandemic, and your reversal on social care, and your silence on what's happening to disabled people. You can expect to be challenged and called out about it, but we appreciate Debbie Abraham's support on her continuing calling out the government on the benefit deaths, and but Labour needs to do an awful lot more than it is, and sadly I'm afraid it's absolutely appalling. And I need to end with this. I think it's absolutely appalling that the national charities have so far been silent on the Green Paper, although I was shown an email by Mind yesterday saying they're hugely super excited about it. Well, Mind have got the individual placement support contract with the DWP that is pushing people in mental distress back to work, and while the national charities are involved with the DWP, they too can expect to be called out on their involvement with the government. And but like I say, I can't stress enough the importance of campaigning. So join Disabled People Against Cuts, Recovery in the Bin, and many other grassroots campaigning organisations, and push this government back. We need all the support we can get going forwards.
Thank you very much, Paula. It's really good to see you, and great to hear you as well. Thank you. Now, Rory has had his hand up for quite a while. I haven't got very long, Rory. We're going to move on in a minute, but would you like to speak about the Green Paper and also maybe Angela Rayner?
Yes, well, I just wanted to support everything that Paula and Mark have said. I'd just like to add that what Angela Rayner was talking about is the thing we haven't talked about, which is the government's long-awaited vacuous disability strategy, which they also released at the end of the same week that they released the Green Paper, except it's about 7 years late. The disability strategy is even more vacuous and dangerous than the Green Paper. But what I want to warn people about is that both of them are written in the language that is used by and around disabled people in order to fool us that they are sympathetic and know what they're talking about. And it's why Angela Rayner fell into the trap that Paula talked about. So it's a bit like Thatcher using the right to work as a term to beat pickets with, you know, and we've got to be very, very careful. And if you want to opinion form about this, please ask us, not the Labour Party.
Oh, there you are. I was waiting for you, Paul, to put your hand up. Paul, the chair of my CLP, so I have to allow him to speak.
Hello, Crispin. I watched that video clip of Angela Rayner. This is typical of a lot of what you might call well-meaning people. I get it from relatives of my own. Well, he basically promoted what's known as ableism, whereby, you know, of course we want people to be supported and so on, but in actual fact, what they're effectively doing is they're basically denying the role that their disability has on that person's life, and of course it does appear that I think Rory was right. I don't think he was actually talking about the ESA PIP merger. I think he was talking about the overall disability strategy. But the Green Paper and the merger, from what I've heard about it, I haven't read it yet, but there are certain measures in there that are very draconian. It basically does appear that you've got to at some point, if the government gets away, you've actually got to start collecting receipts to prove that you're using the money that you're apparently supposed to use it for. So you've got, you know, so it's another changing the goalpost in terms of its attitude towards disabled people. You know, other people have said, as far as the government is concerned, too many people are claiming it, and unfortunately that's reinforcing attitudes that many people, you know, if you go on social media, there are a lot of right-wingers out there that think that everyone with a disability is faking it and all that kind of thing. And I'm afraid the attitude towards disabled people comes directly from the coalition government from Cameron Clegg onwards, and it's getting worse. And personally, as a disabled person myself, I'm very worried about what's coming forward. And also, combining the PIP and the ESA together might possibly mean that if you fail to qualify for one element, you wouldn't get any of them because, you know, because they've combined it, if that makes sense. So, yes, I'm very worried about the future with regards to...
So can I ask you a bit about the ableism that you talked about with Angela Rayner? Because I saw that comment a lot on Twitter about what she'd said. She was obviously trying to say the right thing.
Yeah.
But what can you explain what you mean by when you said that disabled people sort of, she kind of made out that there's no disability or it's not a disability. What's all that about? I don't really
Well, I mean, I've only just became aware of it myself, even though I am a disabled person. I've been disabled all my life, but of course, but it's a kind of, although she didn't necessarily say it directly, it kind of, you know, that situation where I don't know if you've ever come across it before, but you know that kind of thing where, you know, some people will say, isn't it amazing, this person is blind, but look what he can still do, that kind of thing. That's a form of ableism. And I've had it before with a relative of mine where, you know, this person can push his chair like that. Why can't you push your chair like that? You know, and I didn't realise until a few years later what my relative was actually doing. The chances are the relative concerned probably didn't realise what they were doing. But that's ableism as well. I suppose it's like gaslighting somebody's disability,
right.
even though they think they're being well-meaning by saying,
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like to hear more about this because I think it's something that
I think a few other people in the chat have indicated that they'd like a show solely on disability alone.
Well,
that might be something for you to think about in future.
Yeah, we'll do one. But I just want to. Mark's put his hand up as well. Mark and Rory, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important that we understand the history of this, because when the disability movement first started, disabled people took control of the ideas around disability. And traditionally, disabled people have been blamed for their impairments. And what disabled people did was they turned it round and they said, that's a way of looking at the world that doesn't make sense. That, you know, impairment in society is normal. There's no society in the world that doesn't have people with impairments. What isn't normal is how society treats people with impairments. So what Angela Rayner was doing was confusing impairment and disability, and seeing, and in what was known as the medical model or the individual model of disability, the traditional model, was that there's something wrong with you, that you have an impairment, that's something wrong with you. And disabled people rejected that and replaced it with a social model of disability that said impairment is normal. What's not normal is how society treats us. And it's about, so disability is not about disabled people. It's about the barriers and the discrimination and the oppression in society that treats people with impairments differently to the rest of the population. So Angela Rayner was, and that's where Paul was coming to, you know, and we're going to see this with the Paralympics coming up, you know, where disability, you're seen as this damaged individual. And if you do anything like win a gold medal, you're somehow a supreme being and, you know, extra special. And we have that throughout society. So young people with learning disabilities are said that they have special needs. Young people with educational needs there's nothing special about them, because it's normal in society that you have a range of people with physical disabilities, learning disabilities, sight impairments, hearing impairments. That's normal. So there's nothing special about it. So that perpetuates the view, you know, that ends up with a charity model where people rattle tins to raise money for disabled people. So it others disabled people. Right. Disabled people aren't part of us. Yeah. They're the other, and they have to be pitied or they have to be venerated or whatever. So
do you think that that way of looking at people is as damaging as say the way that disabled people were demonized by Ian Duncan Smith, and that they're almost of the same kind. If people have that mentality where they look at disabled people that way, then you end up with the kind of Ian Duncan Smith school.
It has exactly the same roots, yes, and it's rooted in that medical model, individual model, bravery model of disability, rather than seeing the problems around disability is about non-disabled people and their attitudes and their design of buildings and their laws and their barriers to getting a job or in getting in education. And you know, and it comes at its sharpest around education, that the fight for inclusion of disabled people in mainstream education and the eradication of special schools and special needs schools, you know, is a fight. And it's a similar fight to the fight against apartheid, you know, where black people were treated differently to white people and they were seen as lesser human beings. And that's the same with disabled people and disabled children. You know, we're a poorer society if we segregate one group of people in special institutions like special needs schools, or, you know, the scandal that Winterbourne View exposed of young people, particularly young people with learning disability and autism, who are locked up in hospitals. So we're going backwards, we're re-institutionalizing disabled people. And again, you know, Labour authorities are sending as many children to those special needs schools and to those institutions as Tory ones. So it has the same roots, but it's understanding disability as a social issue about barriers in society. It's nothing to do with disabled people. It's the responsibility of society. So it just turns it round.
Well, it's really good to speak. Thank you, Mark. Now we've got quite a few more people put their hands up after that. Rory, you were first, then Steve, and then Andrea.
Okay, thank you, Crispin. Look, how dare Angela Rayner attempt to subvert our term? We call ourselves disabled people. It's our term for ourselves. It's a political statement. It's like the word black. You're right. It's our term for ourselves, and it means we are disabled by society. In her case, the Labour Party or whatever else. But what she actually did was attempt to undermine the term itself. She said, I don't want him to be seen as a disabled person. Well, I do. And I insist that we have the right to call ourselves disabled people and not have non-disabled people telling what our language should be. That's all I wanted to say about that.